Hello there, welcome back to another scrapbookpal.com video. I'm Cassie Trask, and I am going to be showing you some Christmas tags using some Avery Elle products along with some other great products from scrapbookpal.com. And these tags can easily be turned into Christmas ornaments. So these are the stamp sets we're going to be using. That's the Avery Elle Cloche and the Avery Elle Polar Playtime. Let's get to stamping. I have some alcohol marker friendly cardstock that I've put into my MISTI, and I'm going to grab out the Polar Playtime images and I'm going to put those on the top of my card stock, and then I'm going to pull out the Cloche stamp and I'm going to show you a little trick here. So this one, because I want to die cut it, it does matter how I stamp it. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab out the die itself and then I'm going to line up the stamp inside of the die, and then once that's all lined up, I'll be able to close the door of my MISTI. Once I get it all lined up, I'll close the door of my MISTI, it'll pick all those elements up, and then I can just remove that die and put the die away. And then we'll be ready to do some stamping. I'm going to use some Memento Tuxedo black ink because that is alcohol marker friendly. And I'll ink up all my images, and then I'll stamp those down. I'm going to use my shirt to help me make sure that I have a good impression. And I did stamp out that cloche 2 more times. I'm going to start with some E44 for the wood base of my cloche, and then I'm going to bring in some E87. I like the gold undertones that the E87 brings in, and as you can see, because this is a rounded image, I don't typically go to the edges. I like to it kind of gives the illusion, or it tricks the eye into thinking that it is something that is rounded. And then I'll go back in with my light tone and blend that out a little bit more, and I'll bring in the E87 one more time just to kind of deepen those edges a little bit more. And then I'm going to move on to coloring the sled because I plan to use the same colors. And I don't really have a light source when I am coloring these little images. I am just kind of putting down the dark shades where I think they might look good, and the lighter shades where I think they would look good as well. And in this case, I'm going to do that E87 kind of coming up from the bottom. And then of course, wherever those little guys are sitting, it's going to look like it's a shadow around them. And then I'll blend that out, and then I will move on to some C1. So I'm going to use some cool grays for my penguins and for my little polar bear. I do decide later on that I want to deepen up the polar bear, so I come back in with a darker shade later, but that C1 just was too light for me in the end. For my penguins, I'm bringing in C4, and I like to start with my lighter colors. It puts down a nice base. Typically, I would work on one image at a time because the alcohol markers can dry while what you've just colored can dry. And the reason I put down the base is because that gives a little bit of a wetness to the paper. I mean, it's not wet to the touch or anything like that, but it gives a little bit of a wetness, and so then the colors tend to blend a little bit easier. Now I'm coming in with C6, just putting that C6 where I think it would look good. I think these penguins would look good colored as a light blue as well. I've seen that. Even a purple would be kind of pretty. It'd be different, but it would definitely be kind of pretty. Then I'm going to come in with C8. And it's at this point, because that's a pretty dark color, that I'm just going to go ahead and blend that out right there using all 3 of those colors. So I went back. After I put the C8 down, I went back over it with C6 and then C4. And I'll do the same thing with the rest of the little penguins. Just putting in that color in the darkness where I think it looks good, blending out that C8 with the C6, and then once again coming in with C4. I just love these little penguins. They're so cute. And I plan to use 1 image per cloche, so I am making 3 tags, and these are going to be shaker tags. So super fun. I'm bringing in that C1 now on some of the edges of the hat, and then I'm going to bring in RV11 for their cheeks. Sorry, I did not put that up on the screen. And then we'll start coloring the green. For my greens, I'm going to use G03 to start, and then we're going to blend the darker color of G09. Blend it out and then add in a little bit more of that G09. And I'll only show you these 2 penguins because I basically do the exact same thing on the other little penguin and polar bear. And I'm putting the green on the ribbon and on the rim of his hat and on the little ball of his hat. I'm sticking with traditional colors for these little penguins. And I did get a little overzealous there, as you notice, with the green, so I'm going to bring in my colorless blender. And the colorless blender doesn't erase the color, but it will push that color back. Now we'll move on to the orange. And this is YR18. That's for their beaks and their flippers. And I didn't go in with a darker color. I figured that's a small enough image that that would be fine. I'm going to start with R32 for my red. That's my lighter red tone. Basically like a pink. And wherever there was white that I wanted to be red, that's where I bring in my R32. Then my darker shade is R24. And again, notice that on the candy cane, I don't go all the way to the edges. I like to give the illusion that it's rounded, because a candy cane is rounded. And that's when I decide to bring the red into the edge of the hat as well. And then I'll color the other 2 little guys the same sort of way. And this is where I decided that for the polar bear, I wanted him to be darker. So I bring in that C4 that I had used earlier. And then I'll blend that out with the C1. But that way it just gives a little bit more drama, and you can tell that he's a white little polar bear. And then I'll do it as well on the bellies of the penguins, just to add a little bit more dimension, because you just really couldn't see that C1. And then we're going to get ready to start die cutting everything out. So I want to line this cloche up. There's 2 pieces to it. There's the inside piece and the outside piece. I do use that outside piece for backs for my ornaments and for fronts as well, for the acetate that I will cut out. But I'm just lining this up, and then I'm going to tape it down with washi tape. I decide later on the better way to have done this would have been to just put the washi tape on the edges rather than right across the whole middle there. But it worked out fine because I used washi tape. It didn't tear anything. And then that's what you'll get. So you can save that piece if you want, but I don't use the inside piece for anything later on. And then I'll cut out the rest of my pieces. So I'll use the matching dies that go along with the Polar Playtime and the Cloche. And then I'll cut out the rest of my cloches and my little penguins and polar bear. And then we'll have all of our pieces ready to go there. For my background piece, I am going to use some Distress watercolor paper. This stuff is great. And I'm going to use some Distress Oxide spray in the color Seedless Preserves and Chipped Sapphire. And you do want to shake these up, but you want to shake them more like a bell so that you don't clog your nozzles. And then I'll just spritz that all over that background, kind of trying to stick to the edges in the corners. And then I'll do the same thing with the Seedless Preserves, because I discovered that the cloche will fit on here twice. And because it'll fit on there twice, I would have to turn one upside down. And I'll even take off the cap and kind of splatter that all over that background as well. And as vibrant as you see it here, if you have not seen distress sprays before, this is definitely going to dry back quite a bit, because those distress oxides have a chalky look to them. If you don't like that look, you could easily use the distress sprays. And then I'm going to put those back into my splatter box and do a little bit more. I'll even take off the lid and splatter that around. And I'll do that to both. And then I'm going to heat set those. After I'm done heat setting and even kind of wiping up some of that, I'll put those back in my splatter box, and I'm just going to put some shimmer spray, spritz that all over each piece, and I'll end up spritzing some water on it as well after that's dry. And then there are the pieces all ready to go. So this is where I'll take that cloche piece apart, the 2 dies, I'll separate those so that I can stamp that out of my background. But what you didn't see was that I kept the cloche die together with the centerpiece in there in order to cut out about 30 using the white cardstock that I have, and you'll see that later. So that gave me about 10 per tag. You can skip that step and use foam tape, but I like the polished look of the die. And so here's my background, and I'll cut that out a couple more times so that I have 3 of them. See, that fits out perfectly, so that I have that Seedless Preserves on the bottom and the Chipped Sapphire on top. But these are the pieces that I was talking about earlier when I had that cloche die all together. And so I am going to glue all of these together. That did take a little bit of time because, of course, I'm making 3 tags and I have 10 of these pieces. And so I'm going to use that Avery Elle glue. It's just a liquid glue, and I'm going to glue all these pieces together using that. And it's just such a polished look. I'll show you after I get them together. I won't obviously show you all 3 that I do, but again, I just will put all 10 of those on top of each other, and it will make a nice border. But before I do that, before I show you, I'm going to stamp a couple of snowflakes, about 3 snowflakes on the back, and that snowflake comes from the Polar Playtime set. And then I'm going to cover that with some white embossing powder, and then I'll heat that till that is smooth and melted, just to add a little extra interest to the background, as if I didn't do enough to the background. I never know when to stop. The Happy Holidays, I'm going to use that on the outside of the cloche, so that way it'll say Happy Holidays on your tag. And I'm manipulating the clear stamp. That's one of the reasons I like clear stamps. You can kind of change them a little. And I'm going to stamp that using that VersaMark ink once again. And I'll do this for all 3. Cover that with the white embossing powder, and then heat that till that is smooth and melted. So all 3 will have those backgrounds, and then it'll have that front ready to go. Now, if you notice, my backgrounds have some yuck all over them from the spray. So I did cut out 3 more from white cardstock, so that I can put those on the back so it'll look even more polished. And then I'm going to stamp out the 2 from the Cloche stamp set all over the back of those 3 pieces. And then I will adhere, using the same Avery Elle glue, that background to the back of my piece that has the 2 from. And so that is going to be the ornament, or the tag, as you'll see. The cloche also comes with a die that will cut out this piece right here, so I cut it out to make it look like snow. I used 3 of those. I'm going to use that glue once again to adhere my little penguin to the inside, and I'm going to assemble all 3 the same. You won't see me assemble all of them because it is the same, but that's going to go in the center. And then there's my tag. That's going to be that heavy piece of 10 10 of those backgrounds, and I'll just stick that down. And I'll slow it down so you can have an idea of just how thick that is. But you could use foam tape instead if you really, really wanted to. But I'm going to put a block on top of that just to make sure that that adheres very nicely, because I'm going to fill this, like I said, it's a shaker. My next part was to cut out of some acetate using that big cloche die. I cut out 3 of those as well. I'm going to use some distressed mica flakes along with the craft spoon, and just put those mica flakes right on the inside of my tags. And I usually have a tendency to go overboard with this stuff, make it look like a small blizzard in there, and I think I was kind of happy medium, so I did okay. I am going to use some, I thought about using liquid glue, but at this point I was thinking, because I'm using acetate on this part, I wanted to use some 1/8 inch scrappy tape. This stuff works perfectly around the outside edge of my cloche, and so I will wrap it around there because it manipulates just perfectly around the outside edge, and then I don't have any gaps. And then I'll just peel all the release paper back, and then I will adhere that right down to my acetate. And that works out perfectly. Now for the next part, I do use liquid glue to adhere that down. There is a lot of static electricity here, and I tried to use my anti-static powder bag, put that white film all over it, so I tried to wipe that away. I guess my suggestion would be, if you have any dryer sheets, which I don't because I use dryer balls, if you have dryer sheets, that would probably help with the static. So I'm using liquid glue at this point because I didn't trust myself to get the scrappy tape to work as perfectly around this edge. And then I'll just adhere that down, and before I start shaking, I'm going to set that aside to dry. For the topper for my tag, which will also make it part of the ornament if you decide to use these as ornaments as well, is just going to be some of that Lawn Fawn Red Sparkle hemp cord. And I will shove that through the center. So I doubled it up, shoved it through the middle, stick that through the center one more time. I'm sorry you can't see it here. Sometimes I get in the zone, so I'll stick it through the center. That way it'll attach to the top, and then I'll tie a little knot on the top of that. And then here we have our little shaker tags. Aren't those fun? So I love these because they have 2 from on the back, but they also are these cute little tags that you can attach to your presents. And that's going to finish off these little tags. So if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.